Welcome back to Take Action News, everybody. David Shuster here. We're going to have a debate over Social Security. Joining us now, Spandan Chakrabarti is the publisher of The People's View. The site is thepeoplesview.net. You can follow them on Twitter at The People's View. And also our own Daniel Marans, who's the policy director at Social Security Works. Welcome to you both. The way this is going to work is I know you can both see me because of the Google Hangout. Here I have a coin. It's got a head on one side, and it's got tails on the other. Spandan, you call it, because whoever gets this right will get the kickoff, will get to return. Spandan, heads or tails? What am I holding?
Tails.
Okay, it is heads. So it means that Daniel Marans will start this segment. This is how we're going to do it. I'm going to keep a close watch. I'm going to give you each 2 minutes to make your point, and then you can, we'll go 2 minutes back and forth that way to try to control this. All right, Daniel Marans, the question is, Social Security, what should be the future of Social Security and why?
Well, David, I'm glad you framed it that way, because really what we're looking at is the future of economic security for America's working families. We have a retirement income crisis in this country that is only getting larger. There's a $6.6 trillion deficit between what working American households have and what they need to have saved for retirement. Something like half of working American households only have $10,000 in savings, and those numbers are climbing. More than 53% of American households, again, all these statistics from the Center for Retirement Research at Boston College, almost 53% of working American households are at risk of not maintaining their standards of living in retirement, which in my opinion means that the only leg of retirement income that has stood strong throughout all of these periods, Social Security, should not only just be preserved and maintained, it should be expanded. And we can afford that. It will peak at 6% of GDP. We are 14th out of 16 OECD countries in the world in terms of how generous and how expensive our pension program is. So we definitely can afford that. The bigger problem with our deficits is healthcare costs in the long term, which I will concede and agree to Spandan that the Affordable Care Act has made tremendous leaps into. And the chain CPI, regardless of how you spin it, and including advocates, some liberals who say that we do need to have cuts, including Henry Aaron of the Brookings Institution, have called it a particularly perverse cut because of the way it compounds over time and hurts people as they age, later in old age when they are the most vulnerable. Spandan has called it not a benefit cut, but Josh Barrow, from the who voted for Mitt Romney and wrote for the liberal bastion, writes for the liberal bastion, Bloomberg View, has said that it is undeniably a benefit cut because the way it works in terms of accounting for substitution is that if you're saying that the cost of living grows slower due to substituting cheaper products for more expensive ones, you are still limiting a person's purchasing power. You're still saying you're going to have to buy chicken instead of beef. That is a cut. You can say it's a tolerable cut, but it is a cut. And if you don't think that our Social Security system should be cut due to the retirement income crisis, then you should be against that cut.
All right, 2 minutes is up. Spandan, your view. Daniel Marans says it should be expanded. He also took issue with whether or not the chain CPI is a cut. You have 2 minutes.
Right. Okay. Well, first of all, it's nice to be on again. And I'm glad Daniel's quoting Mitt Romney supporters, but that notwithstanding, let's talk about Social Security and what should happen to it, but more importantly, what can happen to it. So the reason we're even talking about Social Security is, according to the latest trustees report, Social Security Trust Fund runs out in 2033, not 2037, in 2033. After 2033, it will be able to pay 75% of benefits. That's an automatic 25% benefit cut, any way you put it. And eventually it'll go, if we do nothing, it'll go down to being able to pay only about 72% of the benefits. So let's look at what Social Security can do. So one of the proposals is, yes, the chain CPI proposal, which pegs benefits to a more accurate measure of inflation. And if that is the measure of inflation, by definition, it is preserving purchasing power. And the current measure of the consumer CPI is, in fact, a little bit of an inflated measure. But that is something we're going to have to do, especially as a part of a grand deal. We are probably also going to have to bring up the level of income which is taxed up to about 90% of all income. So that's taxed into Social Security. We we could take off the cap altogether, but congressionally we will not be able to do it.
You have 15 seconds.
Congressionally we will not be able to do it. And the quicker we start doing reforms, the better the reforms will be and the less chaotic.
You have come in right under the buzzer. Okay, Daniel Mehrens, you have 2 minutes to respond.
Well, it's just simply untrue to say that the chain CPI is more accurate. And even if you think it's more accurate, it certainly, if you think it's changing the benefit formula to a more accurate, to a measure that maintains purchasing power rather than inflating it, that's still technically a net reduction in purchasing power relative to the inflated measure. And even proponents of the law, I think, would admit that. But the idea that it's accurate for seniors and people with disabilities is not true, simply because, again, on the basis of it being more accurate is this idea that the cost of living will rise slower because you can substitute more expensive products for cheaper ones. And for elderly people and people with disabilities for whom healthcare expenses are a larger share of their expenses, and again, that's regardless of what the absolute costs are, since they've been reduced on the Affordable Care Act, it's a larger share of their expenses. They will not that easily be able to replace them. And in fact, the Bureau of Labor Statistics has created a model consumer price index called the CPIE, the Consumer Price Index for the elderly, looking at, for the past 30 years, what the elderly's expenses are, weighting healthcare and their healthcare, energy, and shelter costs more heavily to account for that. And that measure shows inflation rising higher for the elderly and people with disabilities. If we wanted to be more accurate, that's the one we should turn to. I reject the idea that you've claimed in our exchanges in writing that we can't have many different consumer price indices. We already have the BLS looking at this consumer price index for the elderly, and we already have at least two that we're using to determine tax levels and other program growth levels: the CPIU, which is for all urban consumers, and the CPIW, which is for I forget what it's basically for wage earners.
10 seconds.
Rather than all people. I'll get to the political inevitability issue here. I don't think anything's politically inevitable, but it will be a self-fulfilling prophecy if liberals preemptively say that we're okay with benefit cuts and give the.
Okay, you've been cut off by the buzzer.
Well,
Spandan, you've got 2 minutes.
Well, again, this is basic math, David. This is basic math, Daniel. If your benefits start at a given level and that basic benefit is not being reduced, and year after year it is in fact numerically rising in line with inflation, that is not a cut. You can call it anything you want, but that mathematically cannot constitute a cut. Now, the CPI measure. Hang on a second. No.
Like, the old formula.
Wait. The CPI measure for the elderly. First of all, that is an experimental measure, and you cannot have the government have different CPI measures for different populations. It just won't work. You won't have the votes for it, first of all, for Congress to do it. Second of all, you will not... Wait. Okay, this is my 2 minutes. Second of all, there are a million other different kinds of CPIs I can come up with. Urbans versus rurals. Seniors of a different age. Seniors that live in California versus the ones that live in South Carolina. You are not going to be able to exactly peg it to whatever you think is accurate for that given population. You have to do the basic, what the government benefit formula is, which is the change CPI, which it would change to the whole government. So I guess I'll leave it there.
You have come in at 15 seconds. Well, you came in below the buzzer, but I sent the buzzer off right there. We are talking with Spandan Chakrabarti. He's the publisher of the Publishers People's View. It's thepeoplesview.net and at the People's View on Twitter. And Daniel Mehrens, who's the policy director for Social Security Works. You can follow him on Twitter at Daniel Mehrens. A lot of folks might be saying, oh my God, you're having such a conversation in the weeds about Social Security. But folks, anybody who's involved in Social Security, this is what is at stake. These decisions, and it may seem like, well, this is in the weeds, they will have billions of dollars of impact over several years, depending on what our government decides to do about Social Security in order to somehow strengthen it. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to change the format of this debate and let your moderator be a little bit more involved and have a little more jousting and interrupting when Take Action News, the Social Security debate, continues after this.